Before his vague post, I would have given it 80-20, 80% he goes to the NBA. After that post, I still think the most logical explanation is that he's coming back to BYU. He's just waiting to finalize it.
Hello and welcome to the Active Podcast Studio. This is the Loyal Cougars Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds, joined again by Tosh Mackintosh. Welcome back, Tosh.
Glad to be back.
How was your weekend?
It was fantastic. It was the kids' spring break. We went to visit some family, went to DC. It was a fun time. I
just went to St. George, and somehow I brought the cold weather with me because it was like no warmer than mid to high 50s the entire week we were there.
And that's the main appeal of St. George is usually you can swim when you're not supposed to be swimming that time of year.
That's pretty much the reason we went down, was to enjoy the warmth. Obviously, we had in-laws down there, and so we spent time with them. My kids love my wife's parents, and so that's
Were your kids hardcore and still got in the water, or?
My parents or my in-laws have it's one of those like exercise spas.
Okay.
So it's not a hot tub, it's bigger than a hot tub. Yeah. It basically feels like a hot tub, so it was warm. I mean, the water was fine. We got in it. I got in it one time. Kids got in it probably multiple times, but I mean, it wasn't cold, but it wasn't St. George warm, and so it was kind of a bummer, but we enjoyed it. We had fun. We did get to watch the McDonald's All-American game. We also got the news that Dalon Hall transferred. We watched the Houston-Duke game. A lot happened this week, despite the fact that BYU didn't play a single game.
Yeah, a lot of news and rumors and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, no, but March Madness, there was kind of no drama in the first few rounds. But the last few games in like the Final Four, Elite Eight, like there has been some real drama and real fun at the end of these games.
It's wild how elite these teams are, and I highlighted it a little bit last week with Brian. These are the four best teams in the country, right? And you know, granted, most March Madness years, most NCAA tournaments, you get an upset in the first few rounds. And that could have happened this year. I'm actually kind of glad it didn't, because we got to see some of the best, especially Houston-Duke. I actually think Houston-Duke, and I tweeted about this, that was the national championship to me. I think the winner of that game is going to go on to beat Florida or Auburn, right? And it's Florida now because they beat Auburn. But to me, the Florida-Auburn game was the runner-up game. I think Houston and Duke, I still think Duke's the best team in the country, by the way. I think they were the best team in the tournament. I think that game was an upset. But I did actually pick Houston in my bracket. My bracket sucks, by the way. But I did pick Houston to win it all. So I knew they were capable of beating Duke. And we kind of saw in the last like 5 or 6 minutes of that game what they were capable of doing. They really shut Duke down. And granted, Duke just missed some shots as well. But that stretch is what Houston is known for, which is shutting teams down and just kind of grinding it out. Like they're a grinded out team, despite the fact that they are a widely talented team.
Yeah, it just goes to show that defense wins championships is still true today, because it was really Houston's elite defense that just never relented. And when the pressure of that game got tough, like defense, for whatever reason, doesn't seem like it feels pressure. And so it just came out on top. But one of the best college basketball games I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And really fun being in a place where I had a cheering interest. Like, let's go Big 12, you know? Like, I was all in for – and again, my heart got broken by Texas Tech had Florida. Like, they had them, and they just let it slip through. And that was fun. That I can get emotionally tied into, and it's not just for funsies. Like, there's real dollars on the line for BYU even every time a Big 12 team wins.
Well, and just hype for the conference, right? I was actually, almost as hyped for that win as I was not any BYU win, but, any conference win, at least in the tournament. It was a fun win to watch for Houston. And Sampson shouted out the Big 12 schools.
Yeah.
And so, he's saying, he said the Big 12 schools, Big 12 opponents got him ready for that game. So, it's a tough conference. I think the Big 12 has the best record right now in the NCAA tournament, even if Houston loses in the national championship game. Good thing. And we're going to talk about a little bit about recruiting, but the Big 12 is recruiting really well too for next year. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I did want to start this show with the Dalon Hall news. I get that it happened kind of early last week, but there's a lot of impact, I think, with Dalon Hall leaving, and it's not just on the stat sheet, and we'll talk somewhat about that. But I want to start with this post by Big House Coug on Cougar Board, because we, as a podcast, we talk about what you, the fans, are talking about. That's our goal. So Big House Coug says, are there any examples of BYU alumni who are held in high regard after transferring to another school and not ending their college career at BYU? I can't really think of any. I'm not trying to pick on transfers, but we don't seem to get that many people leaving to go on to become stars somewhere else. And if they do, they're usually not stars here first. So the question then is Dallin going to be the first quote unquote star to leave BYU and thrive somewhere else? Or have there already been those types of players in the past that you can think of?
So he had kind of two questions in there. And the first one is, have players left and they're still beloved by BYU? And there's a lot of those. Like, as long as you don't go to Utah, and as long as you go out with some respect and kindness, I think BYU fans still do continue to cheer for you. Long list of those. When the second part where it ends, though, go to become a star somewhere else, I can't think of any.
What about football? Francis Bernard?
Yeah, in football, there are some in football. Yeah, I mean, Francis Bernard is probably the biggest. There was another one in football that I had thought of too. I mean, Jake Heaps left and people still liked him. He was no star anywhere else.
Yes. So let me go through the list of kind of what people replied to in this post. Skizix said Dallin Levitt. More of as a joke.
But he's more
still, as a joke.
He was still pretty good.
He did go to the NFL, so he was on the spectrum of
the star part, not beloved,
well.
not on the beloved,
not beloved by BYU fans.
Yes.
Matt Carlino was on that list, and I don't think Carlino was a star per se at Marquette, but did he go to Marquette? That was his next school.
Yeah.
I don't think he was a star at Marquette, but I actually enjoyed Matt Carlino. I think I don't know if a lot of BYU fans necessarily highly regard him, but I thought he was a decent asset for BYU. Frank Bartley, do you remember Frank?
Yeah. His best years were after he left.
Yes. I think he played at Louisiana Tech or some Southern school. Michael Lloyd Jr. That was actually the first one that came to my mind, was Michael Lloyd Jr. And granted, I don't think he had a ton of success after leaving BYU, but he was a guy that I think was highly regarded among BYU fans, especially for what he did in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, he won us an NCAA game.
Very big game. So those were kind of and Jake Heaps was on the list as well.
I just thought of another one that actually does kind of fit both. Chapman, Jordan Chapman, his best years were after he left. Became a star, is a little strong, but I think he led the ACC in 3-point shooting when he went to Boston College, which is no small feat. And so, yeah, it's happened in small scale.
Ronnie Jenkins is on the list, and then there's obviously like Ali Khalifa, Jaxson Robinson, some of the recent guys.
Even Noah Waterman. I think BYU fans still like to see when he had good games for Louisville.
Yeah. So let's look at Dalon Hall's production, because I think there's two aspects to Dalon Hall leaving and how they impact the team. His numbers were not great last year, and I think his career numbers are okay, but he regressed. Like, he went from 9 points 2 years ago to 6.8 points per game last year, 42% shooting to 40% shooting. His 3-point shooting didn't really regress that much. It was roughly the same. He went from 5 assists to 4.1 assists, and he got less playing time. And that's not to say he was bad. I still think he was impactful when he got minutes, but Egor obviously took the spotlight a little bit away from him. And I don't think BYU is missing out on a lot of production with Dalon Hall leaving, meaning I don't think BYU is going to score fewer points. I don't think BYU is not going to get those 9 points per game next year from someone else. So Dalon Hall, as a numbers guy, as a guy who produces, is replaceable. Where he's not replaceable, and we've talked about him early in the season, this is his biggest strength on the team, is his locker room presence. And I specifically remember a game where Egor had really struggled up until, I don't remember what game it was, up until this game. And he went off against the team. And it wasn't a great team. I think it was like a UCF or like some like mid Big 12 conference team. But he had a really good game. And the first person to, greet him out of a timeout or whatever, give him a high five out of a timeout was Dalon Hall.
Yeah. I've always heard that Dalon Hall is just an incredible human. And I do think that you want as many of those on your team as possible. You do, though, if we're being real, need to value incredible basketball players first. And Dalon showed signs that he could be that in glimpses, but he was just never able to put that together consistently over and over and over. And what's interesting to me is that even though he came off the bench most of the season, he had the third most minutes on the season out of any BYU player. So he was getting starter minutes. Where I'm sure some of his frustration lies, though, is that a lot of his minutes this year compared to the year before were with him being off the ball and him being like a accessory on the court, if you will, instead of the instigator. And I don't think that was going to change. That Egor, we're going to talk about this later, may come back. It looks like there's some signs that maybe he'll come back. But even if he doesn't, BYU has been active in the portal early for ball handling point guards. And so I think the writing was on the wall that, hey, Dalon, you're never going to be our guy, that for every minute you're in the game, we're running the offense through you. And I just think that's who he wants to be and what he feels he is. And he's got to go somewhere else to be that.
This episode is brought to you by Aptiv. Aptiv believes that every home should be enjoyed. They tailor their pest control treatment plans to target pests when and where they're most active. Plus, if you see pest activity between treatments, Aptiv will return to take care of the problem at no additional cost. It's their way of making sure every customer is satisfied and every pest is controlled. If pests stay away, Aptiv is why. Visit goaptiv.com/loyalcougars or call 844-966-4787 and mention this promotion to get your initial treatment for just $29. That's goaptiv.com/loyalcougars or call 844-966-4787. Get home field advantage with Aptiv. Why should you have to choose between style and repping your team? Wooden Grail is bridging the gap between modern fashion and college fandom. Their hats and apparel are made with premium materials like suede and corduroy, featuring bold, unique designs that let you show off your team pride without sacrificing your look. Whether you're at the game or out on the town, Wooden Grail lets you do both. Check them out at woodengrail.com and step up your fan game. Use code CougarBoard for free shipping on any order. Looking to get your brand in front of BYU's most engaged fans? The Loyal Cougars podcast and Cougar Board are your perfect match. Cougar Board is the largest online community of BYU fans with thousands of posts every day. The Loyal Cougars podcast is the official podcast of Cougar Board, and we have sponsorship opportunities available for both the podcast and the site. Contact us at sponsorships@loyalcougars.com, and we'll help your message hit home with the Cougar faithful. Again, that's sponsorships@loyalcougars.com. He, like everyone else, wants to play in the NBA, and that path is just not there at BYU, and that's fine. Like, I don't think anyone's faulting Dalon for leaving. I felt worse last year when Dalon entered the transfer portal. I felt kind of sick about it. Same with Richie, but Dalon to me was a guy that it felt like he was a BYU guy, and he also felt a lot less replaceable. It felt like his trajectory was. I thought he was going to be what Richie Saunders was this year.
Yeah.
Kind of BYU's best player, their leading scorer, their leading assist man. It's just hasn't turned out that way. And I think another piece to this is the fact that Foose is leaving. Dalon really thrived with Foose on the floor. Like that's the type of style. Like they just worked really well together. That pick and roll, Dalon would snake dribble, get his defender behind him. Foose would seal his defender and really be wide open, not wide open, but be posted underneath the hoop for an easy layup. Like that was their play. It was very much a two-man game between Dalon and Foose. With Foose leaving, that kind of goes away. And I don't think Dalon we saw this against Alabama. I don't think Dalon, and it really VCU too, but Dalon was not great with Keita on the floor.
Yeah. It was noticeably different when Foose was on the floor with him than with Keita was.
He couldn't, that pick and roll didn't work. I don't know if Keita aborted the pick and roll too early or, he didn't seal his defender. Dalon couldn't do the snake dribble. Like, it was just a very different dynamic with Keita on the floor. And I actually think BYU's offense is more designed to fit Keita's style than Foos's style. Like, Foos was an asset, and we're not really talking much about Foos in this because he's not transferring, right? He's graduating, but Foos was an asset in his own right, in the sense that he could post you up, he could he could get a bucket underneath. But I think BYU, I think Kevin Young's style is more like pick and roll rim runners. That's who he wants. And we'll talk a little bit about who BYU could be targeting as far as replacing Fusini. If they even need to replace Fusini, they may have a guy on the roster already for that. But I think that was another piece to Dallon's, maybe not Dallon's decision to leave, but maybe the perception of Dallon's production going away. I just don't think he would produce as well with Foos off the floor at BYU.
Totally agree. And I'm going to share a quick story here on your other point, and that is this last offseason when BYU, right after they signed Egor and right after they signed Cannon and the hype was like at a level 10, I was a little nervous about it because I've said this before. When BYU sports teams' hype is high, they usually underperform.
Yes.
And when their hype is low, they usually overperform. And I was at like a neighborhood barbecue, and Brian Santiago was there. And I'm like, Brian, I am nervous that we're getting way too hyped. Like, this coaching staff hasn't even coached in college before. We've got all these new guys that are freshmen. Like, I think that we're in for a rude awakening of some tough games, and that how are BYU fans going to react? Part of that did turn out to be true, by the way. But Brian, in his wisdom, said, yeah, but you got to remember, we've got Dalon Hall and we got Richie Saunders and Trevin Nell that are on this team, that they're going to be able to show these guys how to win in college. What's the BYU way? Be able to bring some of the success from last year onto this year. And that turned out to be very true. Although I think we had some rough patches in the beginning. I do think those guys were able to help the staff get over that bridge, if you will, to what it takes to be successful in college and at BYU. And so looking forward to next year, I still think, though, this staff having another year under their belt, that locker room presence from Dalon, although is valuable, I think they'll be able to get themselves in this next year's team over that bridge. And you factor in, we have Richie, we have some other guys returning from the team. Like, I just think it may be best for both. And my last point is, when I watch the Elite Eight and the Final Four, I also think, hey, this is who BYU wants to be able to play with and beat. We need some bigger dudes. We need just bigger, more physical athletes. That's what's jumped off the screen to me that separated the Sweet 16 teams from the Final Four teams, is that their size and physicality, all four teams are at a different level. And you can see who BYU is signing and who they are going after, that it seems like the staff is like, that's who we need.
Yeah. And I would add to size, I would say length, specifically length.
Yes.
Tall, wide wingspan, guys that can defend even when they're beaten. And what I mean by that is, if a guy's beating you off the dribble, you can recover because you're long.
Yep.
Rudy Gobert. I talk about Rudy Gobert a lot. I was a Jazz fan. I still am a Jazz fan. But when Rudy and Donovan and Ricky Rubio, like that was an elite defensive team. Not great offensively, but they were long, right? And I think you're right. That's exactly what Kevin Young's going for. AJ DeBonsa, like, regardless of if he's long or not, like, he's the best player in the country, so you're going to recruit him. But Dominique Diamande, like a long defensive guy. He's a guy that can replace Mag and maybe even be better if you can defensively than Mag because of his length. Mag was quick. Mag was like kind of a get in your grill, make it uncomfortable for you. Diamande can actually steal the ball from you.
Yeah.
Like, easily steal the ball from you.
Well, and Mag was long for BYU guard standards.
Yeah.
But Diamande is like long for Big 12 guard standards.
Yeah. And then you add Keita. Like, you've got length, right?
Yeah.
I actually think like a lot. And then Richie's a guy that's a great defender, not because he's necessarily long, although I don't think he's necessarily like a short guy. Like he's long enough, but his strength is his ability to get physical with you,
yes,
defensively and offensively. So you have a lineup of AJ, Keita, Saunders, Diomande, whoever else they bring on, hopefully a defensive guy. And all of a sudden you're talking about BYU having a top 50, top 30 defense, which is really what they lacked.
Correct.
I mean, Brian and I went over the Final Four teams. All of them were a top 20, top 25 offense and defense. Houston had the number one defense and like the 15th or something offense. Duke was like number 1 offense, number 3 defense.
Yeah.
So like that's where BYU needs to get. And I think Kevin Young and his staff are recognizing like we have the offensive system, at least the system in place. Granted, they lose a little bit of production on the offensive side, not a lot. We already talked about Dallon's production. Trey's production, again, Trey was like minimal minutes. Foose had offensive production, but I think, again, it was kind of outside of Kevin Young's system. So, you lose a little bit of that production, but I think it's easily replaceable offensively. So now it's Kevin Young and staff going after guys that can defend, similar to what we saw with Houston, similar to what we saw with Iowa State, where they don't have to go under those dang ball screens every time every time they see one. Instead, they can finally like be the aggressor, and when a center goes out to set a screen, Keita is now trapping him. Right, they're forcing them back to the half court line, and then Keita can retreat, and they have to basically reset their offense. It just blows their play up. BYU hasn't been able to do that all year. They had like the 120th best offense, which is not good, or defense, which is not good. So I think. We could talk about the offensive production that they're replacing. I think the defensive production with who they're bringing in already, that's not with who they've signed, who they're planning on signing still, but the defensive production that they're bringing in and bringing back, I think is going to put BYU onto the next level. Now it's a matter of who else can BYU pick up.
Yeah. And it's been interesting to me. It feels like Kevin Young and their style has been a lot more tight-lipped on who they're really interested in and giving offers to.
Yeah.
It's just quite an achievement, because now with the NIL component of it, a lot of people have to be in the know. Mm-hmm. But like Diomande, he was on zero people's radar until he announced.
He was a Washington guy. Everyone figured he hadn't even entered the portal, had he?
I don't remember, but it was if he did, it was like instant. Yeah. And so I just feel like we don't have like the leaks that we used to have on, hey, who might be transferring here. That being said, we have no reason to not have a ton of faith in Kevin Young, his brother Justin Young, who seems like he's kind of the recruiting helper. Like, these guys are going to bring in the right people. I just feel it.
Yeah. Can I tell you my guess is as to why you're not seeing leaks as much as you used to?
Yeah.
I think it's because of NIL. Meaning when a player transferred, it wasn't because of money. At least out in the open, it wasn't because of money. It was because they wanted playing time or they wanted to be on a winning team. And so you had these, like Robbie McCombs, you had these like recruiting analysts or recruiting reporters that would reach out to these guys on their DMs, or they would get their phone number and text them. And they were kind of the mouthpiece for that kid.
Yes.
Granted, they would, the kids would also tweet on social media or post on Instagram or whatever, like their own intent. But I think NIL has kind of monetized that a little bit more, where maybe kids are like, I'll tell you if you pay me, or like I'm going to let this NIL collective announce for me because they're paying me money. Like, I think there's a little bit of kind of NIL aspect to that. Plus, I just think kids in general have enough of a social media following at this point where they can get the word out probably better, and they want their own interaction. Like, I think social media has played a role as well, but I think NIL has become a big part of that.
I agree, and I hadn't thought of that. But they're probably also telling the Robbies of the world, hey, whoever gives me $700K, that's who I'm going to go with. And that doesn't give Robbie any sort of indication of who's in the lead.
Yeah.
It's like in the old days, it's, I want to be close to home, or yada, yada. I like this style. Now, I mean, if we're being real, the dollars matter, number one, and that doesn't give these recruiting experts any insight. The nice thing with BYU, though, is that we do win a lot. We're in a good spot with the money, but also if you're tied on the money, I feel like our style of basketball and our pitch on NBA program, like I really think that we're in a good spot.
Yeah. So that said, who is coming back is still a question. It's kind of wild to think that, like, of BYU's core, the only guy that we know for a fact, because he's announced it, that's coming back is Kebaketa.
Yeah.
We don't know if Richie's coming back. We don't know if Bosco's coming back. We don't know if Dawson Baker's coming back. Granted, what we do know, and Robbie's been a big part of this, right? Like huge shout out to Robbie McCombs, because I think his content is
he does work
phenomenal.
Yeah,
and I've shouted him out before, but I will continue to do so. But it sounds like Boscovich is weighing his options, meaning BYU's given him an offer, an NIL offer. I think it's around $1 million. Actually, I don't know what it is. I know Richie was getting around $1 million, and Richie's weighing those options against the NBA. Boscovich is weighing his options. I can't imagine he's going to get a bigger offer somewhere else. Baker, I think, is content with his role, and I think he'll probably be a sixth man next year. I can't imagine him getting very many offers, if any, for next year. And then you start looking down the line. Like, there's really not a lot of guys other than those guys that BYU, I think, really wants to target heavily. Can you think of any?
Well, I mean, Egor.
Well, exactly. We were going to get to Egor, yeah. I thought we had already talked about Egor, but Egor, yeah, let's talk about Egor, because he's an interesting kind of scenario, because he has said since really early on in the season, because I think people were talking to him about playing with AJ Debonsa, or, wouldn't it be fun to play with him? And he's like, I've never said that I'm a one-and-done guy. Like, that's been kind of assumed. So even from the early stages of last season, it wasn't a guarantee that Egor was going to the NBA. A lot of analysts, they had him in the lottery, and I still think a lot of analysts do, especially after his performance in the NCAA tournament. But there's just he gives us these little teases, right? So social media post this last week where it was kind of a photo dump and a video dump of just his season and some of the best plays or some of the best pictures from this season. And the caption read, "Piece of paper and pen is all we need," with a comma after pen. I don't. He's Russian, so I don't really expect him to have a firm grasp on our punctuation. But anyway, piece of paper and pen is all we need. What does that mean?
When I first read it, I thought he's ready to sign. Like, he's in.
But sign with BYU or sign with an NBA team?
I interpreted it as sign with BYU. It's also, he posted it 2 a.m. too, but I'm thinking, okay, he's coming back. And I still lean towards that's what it means. But with time, I've thought, well, English is a second language. It could have meant he's ready to sign in the NBA. It could have meant he's trying to leverage BYU into, hey, give me the right offer and I'll sign it. It's in today's world, there's always these vague posts, and this was the vaguest of the vague posts.
I love that. Was it the Toulson
Tanner
brothers?
Toulson.
Yeah, Tanner replied, and he said something like the beginning.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I'm like, wait a second. Tanner's at UVU. Why is he commenting the beginning on a Egor Demin post?
So there's talk there, too. I mean, there's two camps. One is
he's in the transfer portal, by the way.
Yeah, one is that people think, okay, there's another card shown. He's coming to BYU. And that could very much be the case. The other one is that I guess he's grown up a big BYU fan, and people act like they know him and say he's actually still a really big BYU fan. And so that could have been the fan talking. But either way, it was interesting.
I mean, he still plays for UVU. Freaking Britton Covey grew up a BYU fan. He's never going to.
I don't feel like he's a big BYU fan anymore.
No, it just changes when you go to a different school. And then the other thing that Egor did was, I don't think it was that big of a deal, but he went to conference.
It's cool, but it's not that's not like a.
It doesn't indicate anything, right?
Yeah.
He went with his girlfriend Delaney Gibb,
and the Hansons.
Oh, that was the other thing too, is that Delaney Gibb,
yes,
who obviously is a member of the women's basketball team, she announced that she's coming back. So I think BYU fans were reading into that, saying like, well, if she's coming back, then for sure Yegor's coming back because they're dating.
It helps. So here's my other one that I haven't heard people talking about is not yesterday being Sunday was the conference. He goes to conference Sunday. I believe it was the Sunday before that. It seems like Travis Hansen posts like a weekly dinner with Egor picture, and that one had Andrei Kirilenko there. Andrei Kirilenko was in town and went to dinner with the Hansens and Egor. And okay, so what does that mean? Well, the very next day, Kirilenko in an interview says, talking about Egor, says if Egor wants to go to the NBA, if that's his goal, then I believe he should do it. But it's not my decision, it's his, and I know he's weighing a lot of different things, and if he chooses to go back to BYU, I will always support him. And I thought, why even bring that up? Like, I am pretty convinced that Andre heard and read and saw that, hey, there's a good chance that Egor actually goes back to BYU. And so him stewing on this, and I think it sounded like not understanding that was just like, hey, I think that's crazy. If your goal is NBA, you should go. But why even bring that up if there wasn't some other alternative that Andre had heard about?
Yeah, and then Brian and I talked about this last week, but then you had his emotions after their loss to Alabama, and I think that, you know, that's just kind of, it could just be kind of heat of the moment, like the emotions of the moment. You had just lost, like you had been, you've been close with your team for, well over, a few months. So I don't know if there's much to read into there, but he was definitely emotional after the BYU lost to Alabama when he was, talking about his team and his teammates and the leadership. And so I think there's a lot of lines to read between. Does that really tell us anything? I don't know. I still think it's kind of maybe 50-50. Like, what would you put the odds at?
Well, before his vague post, I would have given it 80-20, 80% he goes to the NBA. Yeah. After that post, I still think the most logical explanation is that he's coming back to BYU. He's just waiting to finalize it. And so now I am giving it a 60% chance he's back. And talking about length, now we're talking, if he comes back, you have Egor, you have AJ, you have Richie, you have Diamande, and then you have Keita. You have a starting five of big guys.
Richie's your shortest guy at that point. He's what, like 6'?
And Diego's going to get better. He's going to gain muscle. He improved as the season went on. I like that starting five. Then you only need add a couple other pieces, and you've got yourself a team.
Yeah. So then it becomes, and I think a lot of this, by the way, recruiting-wise, is hinging on Egor. I think Kevin is kind of, granted, you still have to go after the best guys, and we saw that they were communicating with Silas DeMary, who ended up going to UConn, and Jaxson Lendeberg, who went to Michigan, two of the top transfer portal guys.
Yep. At that time. There's been some others.
And there's more. So now you have Gabriel Pizzato. He's not a transfer guy, but he's a guy from Italy, another European who I think could make an impact. He's a forward, 6'7". Jaden Quaintance, I think, was an interesting addition to the transfer portal because he's an NBA guy. Like, I think regardless of who he plays for, granted he plays for one of the worst teams in the Big 12 currently, or he did last year in Arizona State, but he's a guy that is known for his shot blocking ability. He's like Keita on steroids, if that can.
That's hard because Keita already looks like he's pretty yoked.
So then, I think, Robbie McCombs, and again, shout out Robbie, was mentioning that Jaden was kind of mentioned in BYU's mentioned in the conversation with Jaden. I don't think he goes to BYU just because I don't think there's really a spot for him to. Keita feels like the number one center, right? He's your five. He's your starting five.
And why these big time players don't want to come here to be like slotted early to be the number two.
Yeah.
And that is what I think is really big on the Egor situation is they need to, maybe they already know and are telling players, but if not, we got to have a decision soon because why would a really great point guard want to come to BYU right now if he thinks, hey, he might be in a Dalon Hall situation where he's capable of being a starter, but he's coming off the bench because Egor is the starter. Another name that entered the portal this morning is Wright, the point guard for Baylor. Really good, young, promising player. So there's some real guards out there, but we need to figure out what is Egor doing so we can decide who are we really going after.
I think KJ Lewis was also in the portal. Like there's a lot of interesting guys. And so if Egor does leave, then you've got Nate Pickens from UC Riverside.
Yeah.
Honor Huff was an interesting name because he is a lights out 3-point shooter, which I don't know if BYU needs another one of those.
They help. The more the merrier.
The only downside is he's 5'10", so the Chattanooga guard, Honor Huff. And then you ask the question, is BYU even interested in a guy like Toulson or Ezra Assar or Jake Wallin? Like you've got these local guys that have been in the portal for weeks, if not over a month. Is BYU interested in those guys? I think a lot of this hinges on Egor. And hopefully Egor, I don't think BYU is really pushing him to decide, but I think they really need him to make up his mind. I think the dead period for recruiting ends in 3 days. I think the 10th is the last day of this dead recruiting period where teams cannot
talk to the player directly,
face-to-face contact players. So they're still virtually interacting with them. You've got FaceTime calls,
and they talk to their agents and stuff.
Totally, and they're calling them. Like you can still interact with players. You just can't visit them face to face. There cannot be any sort of visitations. I say that like it's a divorce visitation rights. So they can't have like campus visits or anything like that. So. But I do think that like the 10th is kind of when BYU needs to know. And I keep checking Twitter because we could know today. Like I think Egor could decide today.
Yeah.
Where he's going. But a lot of that hinges on him.
So one thing I actually love about college sports right now is that it's become a year-round conversation because of the portal. Like that's what I think made the NFL the behemoth that it was, is that it like every time of the year had something, whether that was free agency, whether that was the draft, whether that was the combine. There was always something that fans could like look forward and talk about. And college football and basketball have become that with the portal, there's the several portal periods, and with BYU being a player in that, especially in basketball. Like all of a sudden, we can talk high-level fun stuff for BYU basketball really all year. It's a fun time to be a Cougar fan.
It gives us stuff to talk about on the podcast too, which is great. I actually think this episode has been one of our most engaging episodes for me and you, at least. I don't know if fans are going to engage, but like we had a lot to talk about, and BYU hasn't even played a game. BYU didn't even play a game this last week, and we didn't even really talk about AJ DeBonce's McDonald's All-American game because I thought he played pretty well in that game. Granted, there's no defense, so it's really hard to analyze how a player is in that game. I think Yesufu and Peterson tried harder than everyone else. I don't think that necessarily means they're better than everyone. I think Peterson was a co-MVP of that game.
Peterson's good. He's going to Kansas. Is that the one?
I think so. And then Yesufu's going to Baylor, which could explain why their point guard or their guard transferred. But he's going to fill kind of that VJ Edgecombe, I think, position. But yeah, AJ just looked so comfortable in that game, and I wanted to point this out too because I don't think a lot of people have really followed AJ his high school season. Just because it's kind of been hard. I don't think there's really a lot of stats out there. Not a lot of, and maybe people have, and I'm just not paying attention. But Armand Jovic on Twitter put AJ's averages over the last 10 games. So AJ's averaging 28.6 points per game, 9.6 rebounds per game, 3.6 assists per game. These are video game numbers. Like, is he a forward or is he a guard? Like, we don't freaking know. 48% from the field, 36% from three, 77% from the free throw line.
And that in those 10 games was their national tournament. There's some playing against high level competition.
I mean, they're playing against high level competition pretty much the whole season.
Yeah.
But these are not like scrubs. Like these are not. I don't want to throw out any Utah schools, but these are not like local high schools. These are like national powerhouse high schools that they're playing against. So BYU fans have a lot to look forward to. And that's outside of Egor and Richie and even Egor, Richie, Dominique, the guys that they're bringing in outside of AJ, like that would be a tournament team. And then you have the number one recruit in the country, and you've got potentially an Elite Eight Final Four team.
And what I took from the McDonald's All-American game is that the other players did seem like they kind of looked to AJ as the alpha. And it's just like, man, pinch myself. Like, we have the number one player in all the land that in the McDonald's All-American game, they are looking to AJ, and they just kind of, their body language and the way they play shows they know that he is the alpha. And we have that guy coming to BYU next year. Yeah. It's like, holy smokes, this is going to be fun.
And hopefully we can get some more guys. I was looking at the McDonald's All-American roster, and like 3 guys are committed to Houston. We need to get to that level, right? I think Houston's still top dog, but I think I don't remember who it was. Some betting website had BYU as like the 6th best odds to win the national championship.
And so, they've already pre-said that if Egor comes back, we're 4th or 5th.
Yikes.
And so, like, yeah.
Is that overhyped? Like, at that point, like,
I don't know.
This is like, it seems so surreal to me. And I have a group chat of BYU fans that I communicate with, and I was like, when are we going to get to a point? I hope we get to a point where, you know, a guy like AJ Dembands talking with Dickie V while eating lunch on social media, like posting that on social media, or, you know, even AJ Dembands committing to a BYU, or, you know, top 15, top 10 recruit committing to BYU. I hope we get to a point where that becomes like second nature. You know, that's what Duke's feeling, right? Like Duke and Kansas and Arizona at one point, like these blue blood guys. Getting an AJ Dembands is big, right? Like, you know, Kentucky's the same. Like getting the number 1 recruit in the country is big, but they compete with those guys. They compete for those guys every year. So it's not like generational. It's not like a generational event like it's been at BYU. This guy's like considered Michelle Peralta, a deity, right? Already, and he hasn't even played a game for BYU. I hope we can get to a point where that's not the case. Like, it's just like that's just what BYU does. That's what Kevin Young does, and I think we're getting there. But it'll be interesting to see if BYU can continue this kind of recruiting streak as they move forward into next season and hopefully the next 5 or 10 years. That'll do it for us, though. That's the Loyal Cougars podcast. I'm your host, Jake Edmonds. That's Tosh Mackintosh. If you like what you heard or like what you see, go to our social media channels, head to YouTube, head to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, like, hit the bell to get notifications so we can keep this thing rolling. We've got Jeff Hansen on next week. We're going to talk some BYU football, some spring football. Until then, we'll see you.